Well, welcome everybody, and I'm going to say hello to Carl and Kathy in the back row, and I'm going to try to engage you all. I found my career in corporate education. I had a lot of aptitude for instructional design and delivering training programs. That became my career. Eventually, I went to work for a consulting firm where I was doing things like leadership development and strategic planning. I was very successful. But I had a creative itch that was not being scratched by consulting services. And so in 2001, I wrote a play with a colleague. We hit the window at the right time with our property. We were the finalists in a national playwriting contest in 2002. In 2003, our play was produced for the first time in San Diego, and that little play, which was a very simple romantic comedy, has been produced all across the United States. And I thought, well, my gosh, I'm really onto something here. I eventually got an MFA in playwriting and started to teach playwriting. I was extremely successful, if I do say with all due respect, as a teacher of playwriting because I had a background in corporate education, and most people who teach art do not know how to create effective learning experiences, which is something that I knew how to do. So I decided to get a PhD in theater, and I wrote a book on playwriting education. Now, at this point, what happened was I realized that the principles of storytelling and the consulting that I had been doing for most of my professional career, there was a real strong intersection between the two. And I discovered a passion and an enthusiasm and an excitement for helping people tell stories that I didn't really have around the subject of strategic planning, with no disrespect to anyone who does strategic planning. And I began to ask myself the question, is there some way that I can take the passion I have for storytelling over here and the experience I have in business consulting over here and put the two together? Right, so the question is, could I do that? Could I become a storytelling consultant? Well, there were a few challenges. I still had to do more research on storytelling. That was an area that I needed to investigate. I was going to have to rebrand myself as a storytelling consultant, and I was going to have to do marketing. So I rolled up my sleeves, I dove into the task, I did the research, much of which I'm going to share with you this morning. It was really exciting and interesting. I've rebranded myself by writing articles and places on LinkedIn as a storytelling consultant, and I'm speaking at conferences like this as a way of doing networking and marketing. So I'm really excited about my future as a storytelling consultant. And one of the themes I've already heard in the conference so far today is you constantly have to be reinventing yourself. So I feel at this stage of my life, I just turned 70 on June the 5th. I'm reinventing myself in a whole new way, and I'm really excited about my future. So that's my story and how it is that I come to be standing in front of you today. So I want to thank my technical gurus here for helping me with this. So let me get to some of the research, and you'll have access to the slides after the session. And because I have a PhD, I believe it's important to cite my sources. And I'm going to say that everything I say here today is not just an idea that I made up on the way to the conference today. This is based and grounded in real research that's been done by real academics. And if you want to pursue the research trail, you'll be able to look up these citations when you get the slides. So story is not the information, the content. It's a way of structuring information, a series of informational elements that effectively create essential context and relevance to engage receivers and enhance memory and the creation of meaning. And this is a quote from a book called Storyproof by a theorist I like a lot named Kendall Haven. So this is dense, but I wanted to quote him exactly, but I've broken it down here on the next slide into its component parts to make it a little more digestible. So stories provide a structure for conveying information. I'm going to share that structure with you in a minute. They help people understand why what you're telling them is relevant to them and the context in which you're communicating that information. Information is often given to people and they don't know. They say, why are you telling me this? How is this relevant to me? Stories help people figure that out. They're engaging to people. We like hearing stories. Most of us have liked hearing hearing stories ever since we were 3 years old. And if you came from a family where your parents tucked you in at night, they may have told you a story as part of that ritual. And they make it a whole lot easier for people to remember what you say when you provide the information to them in a story framework. So those are some of the elements that are embedded in Kendall Haven's quote. Another thing about stories is they are really densely packed. And this is from an article in the Psychological Bulletin. Stories are how the brain compresses enormous amounts of meaning into a small amount of language. And you can see that I have the picture here of someone packing a suitcase. You can put a lot of stuff in a suitcase, but you have to know how to pack it. And in order for you to be able to leverage the memory retention power of the story, you have to know how to tell a story. So I'll get to that, as I say, in just a minute. Another thing that I think is fascinating is the research shows that narratives build group cohesion. So research shows that when a group of people hear a story, their autonomic nervous systems synchronize. And they've literally hooked people up to psychometric devices. They measure their breathing rate and their heart rate, and then they tell them a story. And at the end of the story, everybody in the room is breathing in and out at the same rate, and their hearts are beating in the same cadence. Stories have an incredible effect on the autonomic nervous system. Not only that, but they have a tendency to release a neurotransmitter called oxytocin in your brain. And does anybody in here know what oxytocin is? Yeah, it's a feel-good chemical. It's actually the chemical that is released in the brain of a mother and a newborn when the mother is breastfeeding that creates a bonding experience between the mother and the infant. And when you tell people a story, that neurotransmitter is actually released in their brain, which creates a whole different vibe in the conversation and everything that follows if they have a little bit of oxytocin floating around in their neurological system. And then finally, the conclusion here is that it creates a powerful psychological bond between a group of people and it increases their ability to work better together. So there's 3 kinds of stories that I'm going to talk about. The origin story, the project story, and the what's happening right now story. And I think that any professional needs to be able to tell all 3 of these kinds of stories. So first, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the origin story. Now, the origin story is the how I got here story. So who in the room knows that fictional character in that picture? Okay, Raphael. Okay, do you know anything about, what's his name? Superman, right? Clark Kent, his alter ego. You're already giving me the details, right? Do you know where that character came from? Another planet. What happened? How did he end up on Earth? Do you remember that?
Yeah, the planet was being destroyed and they was sent in a ship to here.
Okay, very good. All right. So Raphael remembers Superman's origin story. Does anybody in here know the planet that he came from? Krypton. Very good. And where did he land when he came to the planet Earth? Who knows that? Yeah. Anybody remember the name of the town? Smallville, yeah, right? So the origin, so we remember origin stories, right? Every one of you has an origin story, and you have to be able to tell the origin story. When you're prospecting and networking, to say a little bit, let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you a little bit about my background, right? At the beginning, anytime you're introducing yourself to a group of people that do not know you, to say, before I begin, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Right? Now, it has to be economical. You don't want them to be sitting there for 45 minutes while you explain how you flunked out of college and then eventually rebooted your career. No. And I started my presentation with my origin story. Right, so I've got it up here. I was my background in video production, leadership development. I realized that storytelling principles could have a powerful impact on business. I have my challenges and obstacles, the way that I overcame them, and the resolution and the outcome. So I use this model to economically tell my origin story. And if I told it well, by the end of the, I don't know, 2 to 3 minutes it took me to tell it, you were all, your autonomic nervous systems were slowly synchronizing. Maybe you got a few hits of oxytocin in your brain. It's like, oh, I like this story. This guy's really interesting, right? So you can see the key story elements of the story in the first column. There's a main character of the story. So if you have a main character or identified a specific person, it allows the listener to have a psychological bond with the protagonist or the main character in the story. Right? So, in the origin, Superman is the main character in the Superman story, right? How many of you have seen the movie The Wizard of Oz? Right? Okay, so who, tell me your name again, I forgot. Brian. So who's the main character in The Wizard of Oz? Dorothy, very good. And what is Dorothy's primary goal throughout this story? To get back home, right? And what does she learn when she gets there, Brian? She was there already. There's no place like home, right? So we identify with that main character and we take on the contours of their journey. Right now in an origin story, you are the main character. So you're telling a story about yourself. There's some kind of an inciting incident which raises a question in the mind of the listener that is going to be answered by the rest of the story. Right? And if you're explicit about what the question is, then the listener is going to be waiting to hear the answer. So my question was, would I be able to reposition myself as a storytelling consultant? I asked that question at the beginning, and then hopefully my personal narrative answered that question for you. So then there are obstacles and challenges that you have to overcome. And in any good origin story, there's 2 or 3 kind of points in your story where you might have lost your job, or you might have had to go ahead and think a new strategy for your life, or you might have had a personal crisis, right? And being willing to be authentic and vulnerable at an appropriate professional level around some of these details is going to make your story interesting, and it will cause people to root for you and hope that you have a positive outcome. You include the strategies for how you overcame the obstacles that you talked about, and then you have the resolution or the outcome. Typically, an origin story has a happy ending. All stories do not necessarily have happy endings, and you can almost learn as much or perhaps more from a story that has an unhappy ending, but I would not suggest that your origin story should have an unhappy ending. It should be a positive one. So you can see the 5 key story elements here: the protagonist, the inciting incident with a question, obstacles, challenges that are overcome by strategies, and then finally resolution and outcomes. So I'm not going to practice the origin story with you. 10 minutes? Thank you, Charlie. But I will, I'm going to leave you to think about how you might develop your own story. And then when you get the slides, you'll have the step-by-step process. So now let's go ahead and look at the project story. Right? Project stories are really important. Now, I got to tell you, I love the guy, Drew, from Good Stuff Tech. Were you there this morning for that opening? Right? So he said to the group, I'm going to tell you a story. And I thought, oh, good, because I love a good story, right? And unfortunately, in conferences before, I've had the person say, I'm going to tell you a story, and then they don't tell us a story, and I'm always really disappointed. In this case, does anybody remember that story that he told, the first story that he told? Yeah, what was the... No, this is the second story. The woman, what was the situation?
The first one was the woman came to him to build a proof of concept, and then he helped her beyond the proof of concept.
Yeah, that story was so powerful, right? I mean, it's like, oh my God, he's like so self-effacing. You get his values. He didn't try to sell her something that she didn't need or she wasn't ready for. I mean, what a great guy, right? And he's positioning himself to help her in the future when she's ready. And that other story about the company, the World Series, the company, right? And they were gonna, he said, I want to talk to your finance people so we can get all the finance. I mean, he's like, those stories, pound for pound, told us more about Drew and Good Stuff Tech and their business model and the way they work with their clients that 100 PowerPoint slides could have told us. Right? So we need to have really good project stories that we can simply and succinctly tell people, as Drew from Good Stuff Tech did this morning. What they do is they build credibility, they build relationship. When we took the group picture, I was standing right next to him, so I asked his name, and now I'm going to try to link in with him because I think this is a great guy. I want to know him, right? And they're also easy to remember. Right. I met a woman who's a professional coach, and I said to her, you can use this in networking another way. I said to her, well, tell me a story about a coaching client that you have worked with. And she told me the story. She was coaching the president of a university, and he was getting ready to retire. And he was working on his transition plan for how the university was going to continue when he left the organization. So I saw that same woman at a networking event probably 6 weeks later. And I said to her, so tell me, how's that working out? How's that going with that president of that university that you're working with? And of course, she was completely astonished that I remembered that specific client that she was working with, but I had asked her to tell me a story about a project that she was working on, which made it easy then for me to remember what she was up to. So you need to have a really good project story. So Paul, do you have a project story? Do you have a project you're working on right now?
I'll plug my talk today.
Okay, come up here for me. Now I'm going to go back to the to my little model here. So come over here. I've got to put you on the microphone.
Oh, okay.
So the protagonist of the story is you, Paul, right?
It is, yes.
Okay, Paul Chen. Right, and the inciting incident is that you are going to be doing a presentation later today. Is that right?
Yep.
And tell me the topic you're going to be presenting on.
Accidentally learning computer science.
Accidentally learning computer science. And I'm going to offer a question that the question you might be asking is, will the presentation go well?
Yes.
Okay, that's a question you might be asking yourself.
Oh, myself.
Yeah.
I'm telling myself it's going to go well.
Well, you're telling yourself that, but when you tell the story about the presentation, you may know that it's going to go well, but the audience doesn't, so you have to ask the question to make it a good story. So what are some of the things that might get in the way of your ability to have an effective Tell me again, it's accidentally discovering AI?
Accidentally discovering computer science.
Computer science. Okay, so what are some of the challenges that might get in the way of your ability to do a good presentation? What might happen?
Yeah, it's a short time frame. 20 minutes is pretty tight. I've been cutting it down a lot. Ruthlessly editing has been a challenge.
Okay. Any other challenges you might run into?
People not following along with my story beats.
Okay, great. And the rule of three is kind of magical in storytelling. You know, like the three bears, the three wishes. Is there a third challenge that you might run into?
My demo not working. My live demo not working.
Okay, great. So we got three challenges. You only have 20 minutes. People might not follow along, and your demo might not work. So what are the strategies that you're using to deal with those challenges and those obstacles?
Cutting it down. I've been practicing to see if I can get it down quick enough. For the demo, I've got hopefully running locally with backup so I don't need internet. And then people not following. I never know if people are going to follow what I'm going to say, so that's probably what I need help with and why I'm here today.
Okay, fantastic. So your strategies then, you've practiced, you really cut it down, you've got a lot of technological backup in case the demo doesn't work. And so you still have a question about how are you going to deal with the challenge of people not following along. So hopefully the resolution and the outcome is going to be a successful presentation because you've prepared so much. Am I right? So if you want to tell somebody the story of your presentation later, you can say, let me tell you this story that I had about a presentation that I did at the AWS conference. Here were some of the challenges. Here's what happened, right? So let's give Paul a round of applause for being willing to step up here and do this quick little demo with me. 1:30 in here if you want to hear Paul's presentation. So the last thing I'm going to say in closing is that the what's happening right now story, everybody needs to have a what's happening right now story. So you have to pick an interesting development in your professional practice, a new opportunity, a new product, a new networking opportunity, maybe just the fact that you came to the AWS conference. And over and over and over again in networking events, I hear people bump into each other and they say, Charlie. Hey, Charlie, how are you? And Charlie says, oh, I'm fine. And they say, so Charlie, what's new? And Charlie says, oh, you know, same old, same old. What's new with you? And I always think to myself, what a waste of oxygen, right? None of that. You know, anytime you enter a networking event or a place where you're likely to be meeting other people, you need to have an interesting story what can I tell right now? So I always think when I go into any kind of event like this, what's something that's going on with me right now that I can talk about? And it just so happens I happen to be teaching 3 different playwriting classes right now, right? So that's always kind of a good lead. Well, I happen to be teaching 3 playwriting classes right now. And if the person says, oh, really, that's interesting, tell me more, I tell them more. If they go, oh, that's great, I'm glad to hear that. Hey, there's somebody over there that I need to talk to. I say, well, it was great talking to you, and I move on to the next. Right? But you need to have a log line that summarizes some interesting development in your professional life. It could be your I'm getting ready to take a 3-week vacation to Europe. That's going to be a surefire conversation starter, right? So you need to have your what's happening right now story. All right, so I think we're almost out of time. So I want to thank everybody for being here for story time. And just to remind you, there are 3 stories that consultants need to be able to tell. You need to have your origin story, a really good project story, and your what's happening right now story. And the what's happening right now story is a story that you can put into practice today. So I'm going to encourage you as you walk out the door to think, what is going to be the what's happening right now story that I might tell people over the course of the rest of the conference today. So thank you. And I just always like to say, I hope that all your stories are going to have happy endings. Take care. And thank you so much for being at my presentation today.